David, and appreciate all that you've put into this conference and kicking off this inaugural Founder Mental Health Fitness. And we have our experts panel. So I'm really excited today to see how deep we can go and how much fun we can have over the next hour, and really harvesting the wealth of experience that's on this panel. So we'll dive right in with some intros, and then we'll get into some of the juicy questions around founder mental fitness. So first off, my name is Rick Snyder. I'm based in San Diego, California. I'm the CEO of Invisible Edge and founder as well. And I'm also the author of Decisive Intuition. And typically what we specialize in is developing intuitive intelligence for leaders and teams, as well as how to really develop those higher performing alignments within a company. And I've also been a therapist. I've been a life coach, a business coach, now an executive coach. So this is a conversation that's really important to my heart, and really excited to be with you all today. Let's now kick it over to, how about Jeff? Do you want to kick us off with an intro for yourself?
Sure, thank you. My name is Jeff Gish. I'm based in Orlando, Florida. I work at University of Central Florida, and I do research on entrepreneurs. Before I started doing this, I had a business for 7 years. So we had 57 employees, and I was acquired by a larger competitor and decided, like, what do I want to do next with my life? And I started thinking about, well, I was the type of person who participated in hustle culture. I was the type of person who said, I'll sleep when I die, or sleep is for weaklings. And I thought, I knew the whole while that it wasn't the best plan for optimal functioning as a small business owner. But I felt like I needed a signal to employees, investors, anyone else who was looking, co-founders, that I was really committed to the business. And so I participated in hustle culture, and I wanted to do some research on whether or not that's helpful for entrepreneurs. And since then, I've dedicated quite a bit of time to doing research, and that's what my position is here. I do, most of my job is doing research. Then I also teach some classes for aspiring entrepreneurs, both at the graduate and undergraduate level. But my research now revolves around recovery, sleep, and entrepreneurial well-being. And that's all I'll say for now.
Great. Thank you so much, Jeff. Terri, let's go to you next.
Sure. Thanks. So I'm a psychologist. I was trained as a clinical psychologist, and then switched probably about 13 years ago, got some executive coach training. Decided to work with founders because I love the community, and I'm inspired by them, all that they have going for them. I also know that there are multiple challenges to their mental health and their performance and their well-being. So I figured this was a different way that I could work with people and make a difference. So that's what I do. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you for being here. Appreciate that. And let's go to Sherry. How about you next?
Sure. Like Terri, I'm also a clinical psychologist, and then also do a bunch of coaching for founders. I run a little company called ZenFounder, which provides a whole suite of resources around mental health for founders. I'm also the author of The Entrepreneur's Guide to Keeping Your Shit Together and Touching Two Worlds. And I host a podcast called ZenFounder, which focuses on sort of a broad range of topics related to entrepreneurship and mental health.
Fantastic. Thank you. Glad you're here as well. And lastly, but not leastly, let's go to James.
Hi, I'm James. I'm a serial founder, young founder actually. And I also host a podcast called Vulnerable Podcast, where we dive into founder mental health and investor mental health. I have currently founded a dog training software company, having previously founded a weight loss tech company. And I'm a founder with mental health issues, and I talk a lot about it on LinkedIn. So I've grown my following on LinkedIn up to almost 20,000 now, and I've been classified as an influencer now, I suppose. So so I just want to help people talk about their mental health from a founder's perspective.
That's fantastic. And be careful, James. It seems like you have a dire wolf behind you in the background. So just
I've got two. So yeah, be warned, everyone. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. So let's all dive right in here, and let's start talking just about the current research on founder mental health, including your experience as well, your anecdotal experience. So we'd love to hear, how do you see founders being similar and also different from the general population? What's the profile makeup? What are you seeing as similar and different And how about Sherry? Would you like to kick us off?
Sure. It's a great question. I think I feel very dualistic about this question because in some ways, many of the mental health challenges that founders experience and many of the resources that they have are very similar to other people. And so I think in some ways, I want to help us remember that there's a very human element to what it feels like to be a founder, and to want something and strive for something and pour so much of yourself into something is both unique to the founder experience, but also not unique. And so I want to be careful about kind of isolating founders as too special of an experience in a way that sort of isolates them from those in their community and those in their families and others who may be able to come alongside and sort of share in the human experience. That said, we do know that there are some differences in the challenges that founders face. There are some uniquenesses in the pressure, and there are probably some intrinsic uniquenesses that are part of what we might call the founder makeup or founder psychology that make them maybe less able to color inside the lines and more likely to be open to new experiences and to be people who are pushing against the boundaries of what is around them, which is both beautiful and problematic in a number of ways. So, others can sort of join in, but there are certainly just deep uniquenesses, but also let's not forget about the very universal humanity that is underlying many of the challenges that founders identify.
Those great points. And Jeff, I know you're deep in research. This is one of your areas. I'd love to hear anything that you're seeing in terms of, similarities, differences in that founder makeup.
Well, there are a couple different ways to think about founders. You can consider them aliens. You could say entrepreneurs are aliens, or entrepreneurs are humans. And I tend to be of the camp that entrepreneurs are humans. So I think that there are many aspects of being self-employed that are common to the human experience. But when you have a high personal connection to your work, so it's not specific to entrepreneurship, it's specific to a lot of careers or callings that people feel. When you have high personal connection and a lot of autonomy, you end up working a lot of hours. You end up dedicating yourself to that craft that you've committed to. And so there is some research out there that I'll mention right now, and I'm sure we'll get deeper into this topic. But what I think is very fascinating is what's called the recovery paradox. It's those people that are practicing their calling, and they have high personal connection to their work. They need to recover the most, but they actually find it hardest to recover, hardest to detach from work and to relax, practice other things like hobbies, mastery experiences. And so these people that need to recover most find it hardest to do that. And there's a lot of empirical evidence to support that this paradox exists specifically for entrepreneurs and other people in autonomous careers.
Yeah, I've seen that a lot too, just anecdotally, where there's such this, excitement, but it can lead to obsessiveness about working, till the midnight oil burns. And then I don't have that downshift. I don't know how to regulate myself and relax and have that downtime for myself. So
yeah, are you burning midnight oil, or are you just playing with fire?
Right.
I mean, that's
exactly
kind of the paradox in a nutshell.
Exactly. Anyone else want to comment on research that you've seen about the mental health, founder fitness profile, as well as similarities, differences from the general population?
Do you want to go,
Michael Freeman?
We'll go for it, Terri.
Oh, sorry, Terri.
Okay. So Michael Freeman spoke this morning, right, about the statistics about mental health issues in founders. Okay. So one of the things that I see, and I'm actually at a founder retreat right now in Colorado Mountains. One of the things I see is that they, like all of us, are very committed to, and every single founder that has spoken this morning, mostly I want to be a good father, good mother, a good husband, a good wife. So I think that that's elemental, and that's something that I see across everybody. What gets in the way is the work and the focus, and a lot of times their own issues with proving people wrong or whatever reasons that they're doing what they're doing. So I see it the underlying human condition that I see is that they want to be connected to people around them. What I end up seeing is a lot of aloneness and not taking care of themselves and feeling really isolated.
Yeah, that's actually a really good segue to the next question around what are some of the key mental health and mindset challenges that you commonly see in founders. So definitely, Terri, I want to double click on that around the isolation, the aloneness at the top. That's super common from what I see as well. I'm curious what you and or James or others are also seeing out there are some of the hot or common issues these days.
Well, first and foremost, coming from a founder's perspective, like yes, we are humans, but we're fucking lunatics, right? What we do is really hardcore, and we are living and breathing what we're doing every single moment of every single day. There is not a moment where I switch off. I'm able to kind of dial down the feelings that I have towards the business and where we're going next, problem solving, how much money have we got in the bank, but it never stops. And I think it's never been easier to build a business now, but it's also never been mentally harder because of social media. And I think founders need to learn how to understand how to master their own mind and accept, like, this is what we've chosen to do. It's really tough. It's not for the faint-hearted, but it's an amazing choice to make. And coming from my perspective, Terri, is really interested in what you said about proving people wrong, because actually that's why I started my first company. I started my first company because I wanted to prove a series of people in my life wrong. And ultimately it failed, and it led me to be suicidal. And actually I took the learnings from that, going, right, I'm never, ever, ever starting a company again based on proving somebody wrong, because that was exactly the wrong thing to do at that time. So being a founder is an amazing experience, but you have to take the recovery side seriously. You have to take how you feel seriously, and you also have to not isolate yourself from everybody else in the network, because it's so easy to do that. It really, really is. When you're sat there on a Saturday night going, no, I'm not going to go out for a beer with my friends because I'm going to write this pitch in Canva. And at the end of the day, it could be that meaningful connection with a friend that actually you think, do you know what? Fuck the pitch. I really, really need this. So, yeah.
I think one of the trade-offs that a lot of founders make is this mindset of running their business like a sprint, right? There's high intensity into this pitch or that product release or whatever it is that's coming next. And the founders that I've seen that are really, I think, quite successful understand that running their business is a marathon, right? It has to be something that's sustainable. And so there's a level of recovery, of discipline around sleep, of creating space for that beer with a friend that helps people understand, this is my life. This is the life that I'm choosing. This can't just be this crazy frenetic thing that I do for 6 months or 18 months until an exit. This has to be something that I can weave into the fabric of my being in such a way that it also doesn't destroy me, that it is something that I can do over the long term. And that's, I think, a mindset shift that especially early stage founders sort of struggle to settle into.
And not just at the individual level, but I think at the cultural level too. I was sitting in on an earlier panel, and somebody in the comments wrote, "Hustle and grind culture is dead," or something to that effect. I'm paraphrasing, but I was like, I don't think it is. I was in Chicago just a couple weeks ago speaking at an entrepreneur health conference, and there were entrepreneurs, investors, and they were talking about how they're still participating in this hustle culture, and this is a conference about entrepreneur health. So we were like kindred spirits. We're all talking. I mean, we're probably like mindsets for the people on this panel, but there's still, these investors are talking about, well, as long as my investment is returned, I'm not really caring about mental health. I mean, it's a nice thing to have, but it's not the primary objective of an investor. And I was like, wow, that's scary that you're saying that at this conference, because I know that there are people who could not care less about founder mental health. And so I think that it's not just at the individual level and changing mindsets. I think that's important, like Sherry was saying, but I think it's also important to combat that culture where people wear hustle as a badge of honor.
Totally.
Yeah,
I think it's
that's
also
actually a really good.
really.
Go for it, Terry.
No, you go ahead.
I was going to shift,
Okay.
but if you have something on this topic, go for it.
Just as kind of on the topic, in terms of culture, I also think that we could retrain or have VCs appreciate the mental health issues. I mean, the Founder Institute that I'm at right now, these VCs pay for me to do coaching for their starters, for their founders, because they take the position that mental health is not just kind of a nice thing; it's actually essential for performance and success. And I don't see a lot of VCs taking that tack.
Well, on the VC point as well, sorry, Rick, like I had the founding partner of Enzo Ventures on my podcast this morning, and we were talking about actually how the VC world now is looking at founder mental health as a kind of thing, but equally there's a really strange pushback because they're like, well, hey, we got LPs to return cash to, like we need to get this moving, but we can't have you on antidepressants, or we can't give you this coaching. Like, we need to separate the VC industry now, I think, and it needs to shift into not seeing founder mental health as a PR exercise for the fund, but actually seeing it as an essential mechanism, essential cog to the wheel of generating even better returns for their LPs because their founders are mentally well. And let's not just pump them into the floor. We're better than that, I think.
Yeah, and this is exactly where I want to take the conversation, is around this culture piece. And this is what I want to ask you all is, what are you seeing in terms of the current landscape? Really quickly, I've been to a couple HR conferences this year, and I've never in my life seen more investment in mental health platforms, in supporting mental health and benefits, and bringing that into the conversation in ways that are actually leading the HR conversation right now, where 5 years ago, that was definitely not the case. And so I'm so curious what you all see out there in terms of, whether it's VC mentality, getting the deeper meaning and the benefit of actually paying attention to mental health in a genuine way and fostering that, and also just the corporate cultures and the startup cultures that you all are working with. What are you seeing in terms of the acceptance of founder mental fitness, and then where do you see it moving in the next few years?
I think it's certainly a buzzword. It's a big conversation. And I think in many ways, it's a conversation that's been happening that really got amplified by the COVID-19 pandemic and the obvious need to attend to mental health at work for people to even basically function. So I'm glad for the conversation. I'm a little bit cautious because I think there's a little bit of, it's a little hyper, it's a little buzzwordy. And many of the things that are front and center are apps and tools and really wonderful accents, but maybe don't get to the core of what it is that we are trying to do when we're trying to support mental health as a culture. So I hope that we can take the energy around the conversation to a good direction rather than leave it with, hey, sign up for this service, get this app, do this thing, invest in this thing, instead of the deep reality of our responsibility as individuals and as a community to care well for ourselves and for each other. So I don't know. I feel like it's yet to be seen how that conversation is going to take shape and whether or not it's going to change the way that we actually function.
One way to shift that conversation is to stop considering taking breaks and sleeping, for example, as a zero-sum game. Like, I spend 1 hour on sleep, that's one fewer hour that I can spend on work. When the research shows, some of mine and many other colleagues have done, that sleep actually functions as a way for you to function more efficiently and more effectively when you're working. And so thinking of sleep and recovery as a zero-sum game is part of the problem as I talk to entrepreneurs and investors. So I want to, as I'm, trying to have as much impact as I can on people and tearing down the hustle culture, or at least combating it, I want people to start looking at sleep and recovery as not a zero-sum game, but as a way that you can unlock your best performance.
Can I ask Jeff a question?
Yeah,
Go for it.
Jeff, what's been the shift like in the kind of sleep conversation over the last 5 years in the founder world? How big has it been?
Well, I think that the conversation is shifting. I mean, I've published some research that suggests that entrepreneurs they ideate more poorly when they're short on sleep, and this is controlling for how much you sleep normally. So it's looking at multiple different time points over several weeks with the same entrepreneur. So even if you sleep only 5 hours on average, you're better at coming up with ideas and evaluating opportunities when you've slept 6 hours than you are when you slept 4 or 5. So even for those people that say that's for that sleep thing, that's for other people, because I was getting some of that pushback, and it's what incentivized me to do some of this research. Even for those people who say they sleep less than other people, they're still better at performing entrepreneurial tasks when they've slept more. And so I think those type of findings and others like them are helping to change the conversation. But I feel like it's an uphill battle. And one of the reasons that it's an uphill battle is because, like you said before, James, there is so much pressure on entrepreneurs to perform and to send signals to other stakeholders who are tied to their venture: employees, investors, potential customers, potential business partners, potential strategic partners. All of these people are looking at, do I want to marry myself to this entrepreneur? And so entrepreneurs frequently just send out the signal that I will subvert all of the things, including my personal well-being, to make sure that this venture goes. And so that pressure is enormous. And I think that's the pressure that entrepreneurs have to fight against. So if I think about, can I have an impact, and can sleep research have an impact? I hope so, but it's an uphill battle because of all those pressures that exist.
Yeah, I asked that because my sleep hygiene and getting my sleep hygiene on point as a founder. And now it's the number one thing I take the most seriously, actually, day to day, where I didn't 3 or 4 years ago, has been, so taking my sleep seriously and getting my sleep hygiene right has been one of the single biggest things that has improved my mental health as a founder over the last 5 years. And I read Matthew Walker's Why We Sleep book, which changed my life. And I implore everybody to read that book if you haven't, because it will change your life. Going back to your question, Rick, I mean, I think there's two things here, right? Number one, the entrepreneur and the founder has to find the strength to actually take responsibility for their mental health and actually often push back against the investors, against the old way of doing things, which was hustle culture, grind, and basically work yourself until you are no more. And then also we have the VC debate, which is there is going to be a landslide shift over the next 5 years where VCs really need to get on board with improving founder mental health. Because look, from their perspective, if they can improve the PR around founder mental health, they're going to have more founders say yes to their funds. So it's within their interests, and they're going to have better founders coming to them through their deal flow. And then number two, they have to look after their founders anyway. So there's going to be we're going to meet in the middle somewhere and push forward, but it needs way more people to talk about it like we are, which is why this is so important.
Fantastic. Love that. And I'm appreciating one of the themes that I'm hearing today so far around recovery is part of training. Like if you look at the sports world and if you look at even the martial arts world and things like that, they're already getting that in terms of the science of how important recovery is as part of training. And if we just got that a little more in the business space, imagine what's possible. So I'm really appreciating that balance. That's one of the threads I keep hearing in today's conversation around how do we actually bring that into our everyday life and embody that as founders, as leaders. Terri, did you want to bring in something?
As well as, just like that, similar to sleep, I think play is really important for all sorts of different reasons. I mean, people don't have their best ideas when they're at their computer, right? They have them when they're skiing or hiking or listening to music or whatever they do. the play is like, it like uses different neural networks, right? It teaches us to problem solve and get along with people. And, when I talk to my founders about you need to take some time off to play, you would think I'm speaking Chinese. Like, that is not allowed. I cannot do that. And I push it. It's like my soapbox. I push it so hard and they push back so hard.
It's so funny. I literally had a founder speak to me 2 weeks ago. And she said she was really struggling with anxiety around her company. And she said, what should I do? And I said, do anything other than work. Mm-hmm. Go to the pub, sit there with a book, go and have a drink, go meet some friends, go play mini golf, do whatever. Anything else.
Mm-hmm. And so let's do this. I love this conversation around the culture and the landscape. Let's actually bring it more into the personal now and practical tools. So I'd love to hear, just from your wealth of experience on this panel, what are some of the practical tools? What are some of the things that you have found most helpful that founders can do to improve their mental health? What are some things that actually work? Cher, would you like to kick us off?
Yeah, I think speaking to the sleep issue, one of the tools that I think founders that I work with have really enjoyed is using something like an Oura Ring, where they have like actual data on how their sleep is. And it allows them to give attention to this really important part of recovery with data, with something that speaks back to them. I also think that integrating play into the business in a larger way is something that founders will sometimes get on board with, in the sense that they will help support play for other people, maybe not themselves as automatically. So sometimes the things that I'd love to see founders do for themselves, I'll maybe suggest that they integrate that more into their company culture or into the ways that they are hosting their executive team. And that tends to be something that I think sort of lifts the well-being for everyone in the company. When those things can happen on behalf of the company members, they inadvertently, I think, come back to the founders as practices that they will allow themselves to implement if they're doing it alongside other people in their team.
Love that. Thank you. What other tools are you finding successful out there where you're actually seeing real change happen with some of the people you work with, or even your colleagues?
I can speak for me and my company. Number one, get a really fucking good therapist, because I have one, and I see them probably every couple of weeks, and that has been life-changing. And embrace that, because you have to talk about your mental health, and you have to talk about what's going on, whether that's a therapist, whether that's a coach. Find somebody who is a professional, who is aside from the company, that you can actually talk to about your mental health and your brain and how you feel, and really nail that one. I wrote down 5 things actually here: therapy, talking, sleep, nature. Get out in nature and take time off. I know that's crazy, but one thing that we're looking to do in my company is bring in a 3-day digital detox once a quarter. So I went on one, and I'll give the company a plug here. They're called Unplugged. A month ago, I spent 4 days in a log cabin in the middle of a wood, no phone, nothing, just a compass, a radio, and myself, my wife, and my dog, and a piece of paper. And I wrote, and I problem solved more in those 3 days there than I have in the entire year so far. And that's mind blowing to me. But actually, it was the space away from my phone, being incredibly disconnected, allowed me to look at my company in a completely different way. And taking time off, but being intentional about how you're going to take the time off to actually utilize it to help your brain recover and look at different ways, use the different neural pathways to come up with different ideas. I came back absolutely raring to go, and I can't wait to go on my next one. We're going to do it once a quarter because that's 3 days that are honestly some of the best 3 days I have in that quarter. So yeah, we push through. So that's what I would do, and that's what I try to do every single month is have is have a happy list, right, that I can tick off. So what are the 3 things each week, and what are the wider things each month that make me happy outside of my company? If I can tick off all of those things, then I'm good. And when I'm struggling, I can go back to those things and say, okay, yeah, no, I need to do this. Actually, I'm going to not have a to-do list today. And my to-do list is going to get out of bed, get in the shower, brush my teeth, and that's okay. And it's so important. It's so important. Us founders, we don't look at it like that. We're trying to build billion-dollar unicorns, but actually we forget about the tiny, tiny, tiny habits which make us mentally well. And we need to get better at recognizing them.
Love that list.
A lot of recommendations to add. Do you mind? Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Rick. But I have my co-authors and I have done some practical writing about like recommendations that we can do, and we've categorized these things into the 3 R's. They're respite, reappraisal, and regimen. So I'll just very quickly go through those 3. So respite is taking breaks. That could be at work, the playful work design idea. I love it. Spending time in nature, something James mentioned. Practicing mindfulness. We haven't talked much about that, but being aware of the present as opposed to ruminating on the past is a valuable tool, and it can actually combat exhaustion that could come from maybe having a poor night of sleep the night before. So respite is important. The next R is reappraisal. So I heard somebody mention therapy. Get a good therapist. I agree with that. Like they can help you like with cognitive behavioral therapy or other therapy techniques that can help you reevaluate your situation so that you're not having all this stress and anxiety. Socialization is another way to help you reappraise the situation and become more resilient. And then the last one is just regimen, and that's establishing routine. So sleep hygiene was mentioned earlier. An exercise routine is a valuable thing. So all those 3 R's are valuable. And then one of my own personal bits of practical advice that comes from my research is to understand what your sleep equation is, because I have given a presentation on sleep before, and I had an entrepreneur raise his hand and said, asking entrepreneurs to sleep more is like asking the waves to stop crashing on the shore. Are you kidding? And I said, I get what you're saying, and I can appreciate that comment because I've lived the self-employed life. But what I do recommend, because you can't always control whether you sleep or not. Sometimes you're just staring at the ceiling, and you cannot make your mind turn off. However, entrepreneurs are particularly bad at recognizing when they're sleep deprived. They, like I said, they participate in hustle culture. They wear it as a badge of honor. They valorize hustle. And when they do that, and let's say they're short on sleep, they might end up making a consequential decision without acknowledging that they're poor on sleep, or they've had a poor night of sleep. So, and actually sleep restriction makes decision-making worse than total sleep deprivation. And I think it's because of that culture. People go about their day as though there's nothing wrong and make cognitive mistakes as a result. So I think just understanding your sleep equation, like where you are personally, and when you've had a poor night of sleep, give yourself some time to sleep on a big decision. And I think your future self will thank you if you do that.
Love that. Terri, any tools from your wealth of experience in this space?
Yeah. So this is a tool I use that I think has been really useful to the founders that I've worked for, is actually educating them on like mental health issues and what it might look like, and the fact that you're exhausted and you can't concentrate and you're not getting along with people. This might mean something about your mental health. So when I have worked with actually individuals or doing workshops about that, a lot of founders, they don't know that. Like they don't know, oh, this is depression. Like they don't know that. Nobody ever told them. So I have found that if I can help educate them about what some of that looks like and talk to them about how to address it. Do you need a coach? Do you need a therapist? Do you need a psychiatric referral? The other thing about that is that they can watch each other, like co-founders. If they know what to look for, they can kind of watch each other and keep each other in check about their mental health issues.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. Beautiful. And one thing I want to bring in this conversation is a lot of the science around flow states. And the thing I want to say to those listening here is what's the best tools for you is exactly the things that you need to discover for yourself. And for some of you, it's the things we've talked about today. It might be rest. It might be mindfulness practices. It might be getting outside and getting a breath of fresh air and walk barefoot on the grass like Steve Jobs used to do when he was stuck behind his computer in the 1980s. Or it could be recreation. I mean, you mentioned play earlier in this panel. It could be getting in that creative, spontaneous, intuitive place where new thoughts and new ideas are coming. So interrupting your normal mind states. It could be like literally slowing down, whatever it is to shift the different ways of thinking that are keeping you in that place of obsessiveness, stuckness, whatever it might be. It just seems like there's so many great tools, but the key is, how do you find what works for you? Is it getting out in nature? Is it breathing and working on some breathing exercise and getting present? As Jeff mentioned, getting educated. So that's what I just want to name is, there's so many great roads, but how do you discover the road that works for you? And hopefully through your coaching, your therapy, or just even in your own self-discovery, that's so critical.
Rick, can I just, there's actually something we haven't discussed yet, which is the impact being a founder and also entrepreneurship has on the people around us. And we don't ever talk about the wives, the husbands, the boyfriends, the girlfriends, the partners, and the impact all of this entire world has on them. And it's something I've been reflecting on with my fiance, because she is my absolute rock. And she pulls me out of the the floor most weeks when I'm like, oh my God, this really isn't going well. And we don't ever, we don't say it enough, but how important those people are in terms of building companies and building this, because they're the ones that are laying in bed with you at the end of the day going, it's going to be all right. We're going to get there. And they're the ones who, when everything's finished, if it does finish, are the ones that pick up the pieces. And for founders to not neglect their relationships is one of the most important things you really should start thinking about. Is actually, whilst I'm building this company, I also have an amazing human being who's supporting me just next to me, and I cannot forget them, because they're going to be there when everything's gone, if everything does go, and I cannot forget that. So that's one of the most important things in my life, is not forgetting my relationship with my fiance, because actually it's the date nights, it's the time away, it's the time we're even talking about the business, and she's like, yeah, you're in trouble here, or this is going amazingly well, I'm so proud of you. Like, it's those moments where we have to cling on to those as founders, because they are so important.
And to even understand that is an essential part of mental health, that our mental health doesn't exist just within the neurons in our own brain, but it is a relational endeavor too. And so the extent to which, as founders, we're really connected to those around us and are actively keeping those relationships healthy is an investment in that person and in the connection we have to them. But it is also an investment in ourselves. Like, everyone is better off when we give that deep attention to those around us. And I think the same is true of children. When we are rising and falling in our own stress levels and in our own burnout and our own anxiety as founders, that is absolutely contagious to our kids and to anybody that we're sharing space with. And so that's not this like pressure to manage it, but it is an invitation to really do this well and healthy from the inside out, not only for yourself, but for those other key, really important people around you.
It's so funny. We talk about VCs and we talk about investors, but actually, and we talk about money being pumped into the company, massive rounds being raised, seed, Series A, Series B, etc. But actually, we often forget the investment that the other person in the relationship has put in you, which is honestly the most important thing here. So yeah, it's we need to think about that more.
I often think about our significant others as our first investors. Like, that's the person, that's the pitch that matters the most.
Yeah. When I tried to raise that friend and family round, they were still there helping me buy groceries when I had no money. So so don't forget them.
I love you bringing that point up, James, just around the support system and how critical that is to invest in our support systems. And that's so critical as the social creatures that we are. So really important point. Why don't we do this? As we're just winding down our last questions here, and then we're going to open up to Q&A with the whole audience that's listening today. And so let's just go around the panel here, and I'd like you to think about if you could recommend one thing for our founders in the audience to start doing tomorrow or even today to improve their mental health and their performance and all that goes with that. What would it be? What would be the one takeaway that you'd want to leave the audience with today?
I would say community. Go out there and build a community and be part of it and be talking with people about what's going on.
Brilliant.
I'm going to let Jeff say sleep. I think that'd be fitting. And I'm going to say write a gratitude list and go and tell your wife, your girlfriend, your husband, your boyfriend, your partner, whoever it might be, that you love them and you appreciate them. And it makes you feel really, really good.
I'm going to say find a hobby that's playful, that you love, that involves your body. Video games do not count. Something that is active, a martial art, a cycling club, bocce ball, whatever it is. But get out of your chair and into your body.
Nice.
Well, sleep's a little too on the nose, so I'd like to say at least one other thing, and that's to maybe normalize talking about mental health as self-employed people. Because I think when I met other people who were self-employed and we talked about hustle culture, it was like we fed off of each other. And I think that entrepreneurs can feed off of each other in a positive, more generative and healthy way by normalizing being okay with working on yourself as well as on your business.
And for me, I'm going to leave it in a different angle around get to know your inner critic. You know, get to know the voices that are tripping inside your head that tell you you don't know how to do it right or good enough, or comparing yourself to other people, or you're too much or not enough, or whatever your narratives might be. How do you actually get to know that record player and what the stories are? And how do you start to separate the voice of your inner critic from the voice of your intuition and the voice of your wisdom? And so I think the more that you start to self-reflect and even get some support in those ways as well, you can start to separate from that nattering that's going on in the background. For me, that's been the place where I've seen executives and leaders skyrocket in their confidence and their ability to feel congruent with themselves and not feel like an imposter, being able to speak truth to power more courageously, all the things that come with really getting to align with that deeper wisdom that each of us have. So for me, that's the tool.
And tell that inner critic to have a day off because it's bloody boring.
It takes a little too much space sometimes.
Boring, yeah. Just piss off.
So thank you all for that. So much amazing wisdom and tools that we just shared here today. Let's open it up now to some of the audience questions. So I've got a list of some of the questions here, and we'll just do it, popcorn style, whoever feels like they want to respond. So one question that comes, it's a great one here around what characteristics should one look for when they're looking for a therapist and or a coach to work with? What are some of the things that you'd recommend? How do they become an informed consumer?
Couple things. I mean, this relationship is going to be most effective when it is a relationship, when it's someone that you feel connected to, that you just they get you. There's just a good vibe. It's called working alliance in the literature, but good vibe is, I guess, the shorthand term for it. And so it's okay to interview folks and just, ask for a 20-minute consult, get a sense of what it's like to talk to them and how well they fit and seem to get you. It's frankly more important than where they went to school or what training certificate they have or what techniques they use. It's the sense in which you trust them and they seem to understand you. Secondly, I think founders' lives are so busy that if you can find a coach or a therapist who really does technology well, that's real helpful. So if they have an online scheduling system, if they do Zoom, if they can meet with you around your sort of chaotic life, then I think that breaks down one of the barriers that gets in the way of founders having a consistent relationship with a coach or therapist. And that's just the time demands and the convenience of inconvenience rather, of having to drive to some office and take all that time sort of out of your day. So make it work for you structurally. Ask for what you need. Find a person who can accommodate within limits, and find a person who is easy to be with and has good experience.
I can only speak from my experience, having been involved in therapy now for the best part of 15 years. God, I'm messed up, aren't I? Is be comfortable with the fact that you're going to go through probably 3, 4, even 5, which comes to your point, people, until you find the right one. And now I've been with the same therapist for the last 6 years. Amazing. But it took a while to get there, and don't be disheartened if you don't find the one. It's like dating, isn't it?
It is a little like dating.
Yeah.
Yes,
Like if you
much.
don't find the
Painful.
one on the first match, it's like, okay, keep swipe right, find another one. We'll get there. You will get there. There's enough therapists out there to find the right one.
Love that point. So true. To not just jump into the first opportunity, but how do you actually, meet several and feel who you feel that intuitive connection with, and to take the time to do that for yourself. I'm curious, can anyone here speak to any research that's been done about the effectiveness of group coaching or group therapy? How can founders best show up to the group, because they're always going to be obviously part of a group here, to get the most and give the most benefit? Anyone have any angles on group effectiveness?
Well, I should probably let the clinical psychologist speak here, but I just want to say one thing of my personal experience in working with a therapist and in having a long relationship with my wife. There are things that you can say to a therapist that you maybe wouldn't say with someone that you have these role expectations that are behind them. So I'm a husband, and I'm also a person who has a job. And when I go and speak with a therapist, I don't have any role with that person except to work through the things that are rattling around in my mind. So I would say one warning that I have anecdotally, and then I'll let the clinical psychologist tell me why I'm wrong. But I think anecdotally, if you're in a group, you're probably going to feel some of those role expectations of you, the entrepreneur, that you might not feel if you were one-on-one with a therapist. But feel free to tell me why I'm wrong there.
You're wrong. No, just kidding. You're also right.
Right.
Terri, do you want to jump in? I can jump in too, but go ahead, Terri.
Sure. Yeah, I have a definite opinion about this. So you're not wrong. You're right. And my experience is that groups are incredibly powerful. And a lot of that has to do with how big the group is and their commitment to showing up regularly, and how well you are as a facilitator and as a group member to build trust. But one of the things about founders and groups is they get to see, oh yeah, here's these other people struggle with the same issues. And I'm not the only one. I'm not a failure. This is like part of the process. And then, share resources and share coping tools. And I just think that groups are incredibly powerful. I think that there are absolutely times when individual therapy is more appropriate, and or do both. But I think groups are incredibly powerful for founders.
And there's a long history of mental health related research around the efficacy of groups for whether it's depression or substance abuse concerns. So it works a little bit differently, but I'm just going to echo Terri's sentiment that they can be so powerful. They just are a different container. They're a different setup. So I think your ability to hold confidence, your ability to take risks and be trusting, and having a facilitator that is really skilled at helping that group function in a healthy way are some of the indicators that you're going to look for in, whether or not a group program is going to be a good fit for you.
Another question that's come up around, so this is to James and any others, is what kind of problems are you able to solve while being unplugged? What are some of the kinds of problems?
How long have we got?
How much do you need?
Do you know
Less
what?
than 3 days.
Yeah.
Right.
Do you know what? It's amazing what you can do when you turn your phone off or you lock it in a safe. And I think my fiance said that the phone is like an attention whore, and I was like, it really is. And I was like, wow, can we actually not be connected for 3 days and live? And the answer is yes. So actually, being able to be unplugged was genuinely life-changing for me, because I've never done it before. And when now it's going to be my go-to when I'm stuck. Okay, I'm going to go and take 3 or 4 days out. The question was, what kind of problems was I able to solve while being unplugged? I mean, they're mostly around the business, and I won't bore you with dog training software, but it was, a lot of it was around the fundraise. Our fundraise recently hasn't been going as well as I thought it would. So actually, I was able to sit there with no notifications going off, with a big bit of paper, and not have anybody want to talk to me other than my fiance, and she doesn't want to talk to me at the best of times. And so just being able to write and draw and be able to solve the most critical problems that were on the top of my mind now and when I was there, and thinking, how do I feel about this? And we don't get that. We don't get to do that often because we have a phone, we've got a laptop, we are constantly connected. I read somewhere, and I'm not sure whether this is true or not, but I think it is, that we have more digital touch points in one day than our grandparents had in their whole lifetime. And it is not unfathomable now why we're so overwhelmed all the time. Mm-hmm. And I think when you actually think about that, that is insane.
Mm.
I think when we're given time and space to reflect on our lives, that's where some really juicy information can rise to the top or rise to the surface. And I share your sort of enthusiasm for what I would call founder retreats, which happen quarterly, which is a time out from the day-to-day running of the business and a deeper dive into your inner workings. And there are lots of ways to structure that and do that. But 2 questions that I think can be really helpful in that context is simply, what have been the high points in this last quarter, and what have been the low points? And working under the assumption that the high points are the parts of your life where you're thriving, and the low points are parts of your life where maybe there's a misfit between the tasks on your plate and your internal gifts, or there's a place where you're not resourced well. And so simply by asking these relatively large questions, if you linger with them, if you sit with them for a while, they give really wonderful information into potential changes that you could make in your life to optimize those high points, those places of congruence, of flow, and minimize the number of low points or the intensity of those low points. But those questions require space.
That exactly is, for me, it has been the number one benefit for retreats, meditation retreats, these kinds of things, taking the time out, getting away from the phone, is exactly what you said. Is I'm actually creating space for my intuition to find me, for my vision, for work, and it's usually around decision making and direction. Is how I use that space and time. Is how, especially if there are things that are misaligned, maybe with other co-founders, or it could be any directional challenges in my business. And when I create that space and time, I'm able to connect dots, and my subconscious kicks in and whispers things in my ear that I never would have thought of if I'd just been doing things as normal. So it's just opened up the space for creativity and visioning when I've allowed myself to have that space and time. It's been invaluable for me.
Yeah.
One of our last questions here is the burning question for Dr. Terri Finney and others. So we'll start with you, Terri, is what are some tips that you're giving to the investors you're working with on how to encourage their portfolio company founders to be open about mental health and coaching?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when I worked with venture companies and some accelerators, I mean, it really starts with the top, and it starts with the people being in charge, whether it's a managing director or a VC. But it kind of starts at the top with some vulnerability on the part of the people who are in the lead. And because that creates a little bit of a safer space for other people to chime in and say, oh yeah, me too. That, I think, is the space where, and I know that's the space that the VCs that I'm working for right now at this retreat, I mean, they are all about, we're going to create a safe space. And they also they have been willing to share their own journeys and their own depression and their own hospitalizations. And that makes it okay for other people to say, yeah, me too. It's a vulnerability at the top, basically.
Love that.
I think it's a really interesting conversation to have with VCs too around purely just the capitalist model around what companies do better. So the companies where founders are really struggling, those are where we have these like messy co-founder relationships that end up in turmoil. That's where we have a lot of turnover. When we see companies that turn out not to be a great investment, not always, but sometimes we can clearly trace that back to elements of leadership that were the result of less than well functioning or less than well behavior. And so I think you can challenge VCs to look back at their own portfolio and look at the companies that behaved or that performed really well and sort of examine what are the qualities of those founders. And then let's look at the shit shows, the things that fell apart, the companies that didn't perform the way that we'd hoped for. And what was going on with those individuals on a human level? Like, is there an element of mental health, or at least an element of not attending to introspection, personal behavior, ways of communicating, ways of relating to others that contributed to the implosion? And I feel like in those conversations, the data sort of speaks for itself.
Well, another thing to remember is that these venture capitalists and angel investors, many of them are former founders themselves. And so they may be prone to look back at their hustle experience as a rite of passage. And so trying to get them to recall that, remember those times, don't look at your time as an entrepreneur as with the warm glow on it. Remember those times when you're struggling too. And then the other thing that I'll say is that I think the research community has a tough job ahead of it to show that there are actual performance metrics that matter for mental health and well-being. I don't feel like that conclusion has been met yet. And so I and my colleagues need to do a better job at coming up with conclusions that are tied to venture performance. And that's hard to do because it's, new ventures, especially in the early stages, are messy and there are a lot of ups and downs, and figuring out performance and which metric do you measure performance by is a difficult task. But I think it's a task that researchers should take up to be able to provide some more empirical evidence that mental health matters for performance.
I am so glad you're doing the research. Just because I hate to do it, but I love to read it. So thanks.
I hate to do it when I get a paper rejected too, but it's pretty sweet when it gets in.
We're about to wrap up our hour here, but just a final question. We could even just go do like a laser round here really quickly. What do we still have to learn about mental health and fitness for founders? Like, where's still the questions left for us today? Let's do a quick round.
Sorry, what's the question again, Rick?
Yeah, so the question is, what do we still have to learn?
Maybe it's too late here, but that really threw me.
Yeah, like what do we still have to learn about mental health and fitness for founders? So far we've come, but what's still the area? What's that growth edge right now that you're seeing?
I think it's like the whole stigma issue. We have to keep working on like the stigma and how to decrease that so that it's okay for them to be who they are.
100%. Yeah, I think with most people that come on my podcast, it is almost a relief to start talking about their mental health from a founder. It's like, oh my God, I've actually got a safe space to do it in a non-judgmental way, because actually, I mean, the way, coming from a founder's perspective, the way we look at it is, well, if I talk about my mental health, what are my investors going to think? Or what are prospective investors going to think? What are user-based customers going to... And actually, talking about your mental health, I think, breeds a better brand, gives founders more brand equity. It shows vulnerability as a leader, but equally, we have to, and I agree with Terri, we have to keep hammering down the stigma attached to mental health being a founder. In fact, we have to keep hammering the stigma attached to talking about your mental health full stop. And that goes for men and women. So yeah, it really is. The stigma point is massive. That is where I think we've got still a long way to go. It's getting much better, but we've got a long way to go.
I want Sherry to go last, so because what she would say would be much smarter than anything that I would have to say. So I just think that if we could, I guess, get people to, like I said before, normalize this conversation. And James, it's a little bit of reiteration of what James was saying, normalize this conversation around founder mental health and have them experience that relief of being okay to take an occasion to take a break and recover. And then also I think it'd be really cool to look at people who have a proclivity to entrepreneurship. I saw one of the questions that didn't get asked was about like mental health and mental disorders and illnesses, and how some of these illnesses actually cause people to be more likely to be an entrepreneur. And maybe it helps them get into entrepreneurship, but maybe they struggle as an entrepreneur beyond the founding phase and the growth phase or in the settling down phase. So I think that there's a lot more research to be done in that area too.
Yeah, we know a lot about the ingredients of a good life. We know a lot about what helps people recover, recharge, and feel satisfied with their work and with their relationships. And I think it's really this piece of culture shift around making that as attractive as hustle culture, making wellness, happiness, contentment, and success this sort of package that we as founders want to perpetuate to those around us and truly from the inside out, something that's deep within us that sort of flows to the outside. We don't need a lot of new information. We just really need action.
Well, thank you all. This has been tremendously rich conversation. I know we could talk for hours on this topic. Appreciate your passions, all the work that each of you and all of us have done to make the impacts that we're passionate about making. And I know I'm excited to see where this conversation goes and the ripple effects from today's talk. So thank you all for being